He wiped the grease from his hands with a worn rag, the harsh fluorescent glow of his garage stripping color from his weathered face. To the casual observer, the unassuming building on Maple Street was merely another auto repair shop, its faded sign proclaiming Hayes Automotive, Engine Repair and Custom Work. Yet beneath this humble facade lay a world unseen: reinforced walls, hidden servers humming behind false panels, and prototype vehicles poised to revolutionize transportation within the decade. By the way, please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. At 38, Rob had mastered the art of perception. 5 years prior, he was Robert Hayes, the enigmatic founder of Neuralink Dynamics, a company that had quietly reshaped military drone technology. His sale to the Department of Defense, a staggering $3.2 billion, remained classified at the highest levels. The world believed Neuralink had simply vanished, swallowed by regulatory challenges. Only a chosen few knew the truth. Rob had become one of America's most formidable defense contractors, operating from the impenetrable depths of shadow. The garage was his sanctuary, his laboratory, his perfect disguise. Here he forged next-generation technology, meticulously maintaining the illusion of a middle-class mechanic. It was a life he'd shared with Linda, his wife of 12 years, until 6 months ago. Then the world fractured. Linda Morrison Hayes, his anchor through the turbulent years, had been the epitome of support during Neuralink's nascent stages, working double shifts as a nurse to keep them afloat. But success, even cloaked in secrecy, had irrevocably altered her. The modest life Rob maintained as cover began to chafe against her burgeoning desires for status and opulent luxury. "Rob, we need to talk," Linda had declared that frigid February evening, her voice laced with a growing distance that had been gnawing at them for months. He'd looked up from his workbench where he'd been fine-tuning sensors for his latest marvel, an autonomous vehicle system that would render Tesla a mere child's toy. "What's on your mind?" She gestured around the garage, her expression a barely veiled mask of disgust. This life. I'm tired of pretending we're content with mediocrity. I'm tired of my friends asking why my husband runs a grease monkey shop when I went to nursing school. A chilling certainty settled in Rob's chest. "Linda, you know there's far more to what I do here than fixing broken-down cars for pocket change." She laughed, a brittle, bitter sound. "Rob, I love you, but I simply cannot live like this anymore. I've met someone who can give me the life I truly deserve." That someone turned out to be Trevor Sullivan, the CEO of Pinnacle Industries, a middling manufacturing company. Sullivan was everything Rob outwardly was not: flashy, overtly wealthy, and consumed by a desperate need to broadcast his success. He flaunted a Lamborghini, resided in a penthouse, and scattered money like confetti. What Linda remained oblivious to was Pinnacle Industries' precarious state, hemorrhaging funds on failed contracts, with Trevor's lavish lifestyle propped up by maxed-out credit lines and deceptive accounting. She also had no inkling that Rob could acquire and dismantle Trevor's entire enterprise 100 times over without feeling the slightest tremor in his colossal fortune. But Rob had released her, not from a lack of love, but because he'd unearthed a fundamental truth about Linda Morrison Hayes. She was precisely as she appeared: shallow, materialistic, and ultimately disloyal. The woman who had once pledged eternal devotion, for better or worse, had abandoned ship the instant she perceived a more advantageous captain. The divorce was finalized 3 months prior. Linda claimed half of his visible assets: the house, the shared savings, her car. She left him with the garage and what she believed were his shattered dreams. Had she known she was forsaking a fortune eclipsing the GDP of most small countries, she might have reconsidered. But Rob had ensured she never would. Now, as he toiled on what appeared to be a mundane engine rebuild, but was in fact a prototype hydrogen-electric hybrid poised to revolutionize clean energy, Rob meticulously plotted. For 3 months, he had meticulously gathered intelligence on Trevor Sullivan and his business dealings, pinpointing weaknesses, pressure points, and opportune moments. The game was about to begin, and Rob had always excelled at games. His secure phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Henry Caldwell, one of the precious few privy to Rob's true identity. Henry, a scion of old money, a billionaire who had inherited and exponentially expanded his wealth through astute investments, was more crucially Rob's silent partner in numerous ventures and had become a sagacious mentor. Charity auction next month. Pinnacle Industries is a major sponsor. Time to come out and play. Rob smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. Henry understood about Linda and Trevor. He also knew that Rob never forgot a betrayal and never offered forgiveness for one. The charity auction was a perfect stage, public, prestigious, precisely the kind of event where Trevor would parade Linda around like a prized trophy. The game was truly about to commence, and Robert Hayes had spent 3 months meticulously loading the dice. Chapter 2. The Art of War. 3 weeks before the charity auction, Rob sat in the secluded corner of Milano's, an upscale downtown restaurant, observing Linda and Trevor through the expansive windows. They were celebrating, Trevor's booming laughter and Linda's animated gestures making that abundantly clear. Rob sipped his coffee, subtly activating the recording device concealed within his watch, a piece of technology that would undoubtedly stir envy in the CIA. Linda looked transformed. Her once brown hair was now a striking platinum blonde, styled in an expensive cut that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. She wore a designer dress Rob recognized from a Nordstrom catalog, priced at $2,800, far exceeding anything she could afford on a nurse's salary. Trevor, just as Rob predicted, was financing her new lifestyle. Their celebration's true nature became evident when Trevor produced a small velvet box. Even from his distant vantage point, Rob could discern the oversized diamond ring. Linda's delighted squeal resonated across the restaurant as she flung her arms around Trevor's neck. Rob felt nothing, no jealousy, no pain, no regret. Linda had made her choice, and soon she would face its stark consequences. For the past 3 weeks, he hadn't merely plotted revenge. He had meticulously constructed the edifice for Trevor's absolute annihilation. The initial phase involved rigorous information gathering. Rob's vast network of contacts within the intelligence community, relationships forged during his tenure developing classified technology, had provided him with every detail imaginable about Trevor Sullivan. The man was precisely what he appeared to be: ambitious, arrogant, and utterly out of his depth. Pinnacle Industries was indeed faltering. Trevor had inherited the company from his father but lacked the astute business acumen to manage it effectively. He had been masking losses with creative financing, delaying payments to suppliers, and brazenly siphoning company funds for personal extravagance. None of it was technically illegal, yet it painted a vivid portrait of a man living far beyond his means. More critically, Rob had unearthed Trevor's Achilles heel, his desperate craving for approval and status. The man would sacrifice anything to appear successful, even if it meant mortgaging his entire future. This was where Phase 2 came into play. Rob dedicated 2 weeks to meticulously crafting the persona of Michael Torres, a fictitious investment consultant representing a consortium of international investors with a keen interest in manufacturing companies like Pinnacle. Michael Torres possessed an impeccable background, glowing references, and most importantly, access to substantial capital. Every detail was fabricated, but the fabrication was flawless. Torres had approached Trevor through carefully selected intermediaries, expressing interest in a potential partnership. The lure was irresistible, a $50 million investment in exchange for a minority stake in Pinnacle Industries. For Trevor, it was salvation. For Rob, it was the very rope Trevor would use to hang himself. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow at Pinnacle's headquarters. Rob, subtly disguised as Torres with professional prosthetics and a different hairstyle, would present Trevor with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true, because it was. But first, Rob had one final piece of intelligence to acquire. He activated the directional microphone concealed in his collar, another piece of classified technology capable of isolating conversations from 50 yards away. Linda's voice came through with crystal clarity. "Can't believe how different everything is now. I mean, look at this ring. Rob never would have bought me something like this. He was always so cheap, always talking about being practical." Trevor's laugh was ugly, condescending. "Practical? That's one way to put it. I still can't believe you were married to a grease monkey for 12 years. What were you thinking?" "I thought I loved him," Linda said, twirling the ring on her finger. "But love doesn't pay for nice things, does it? Love doesn't get you into the country club or buy you a house in the hills." "Well, you're with a real man now," Trevor declared, his voice thick with arrogance. "Someone who knows how to provide for his woman, someone who's actually accomplished something with his life." Rob switched off the microphone. He had heard enough. Linda hadn't merely left him for money. She actively despised the life they had painstakingly built together. The woman he had loved, supported, and trusted had not only betrayed him but was now publicly ridiculing him. The cold, precise calculation that had propelled Rob to success in business now focused its entire unyielding force on revenge. Linda and Trevor believed they were living a fairy tale. Rob was about to transform it into a waking nightmare. His phone vibrated with a message from one of his contacts at the Pentagon. "Torres' identity is locked and loaded. Credit history, background checks, references, everything will pass any scrutiny. The money trail is clean and untraceable. Good hunting." Rob smiled and left a $20 bill on the table. Tomorrow he would meet Trevor Sullivan as Michael Torres. In 3 weeks he would reveal himself at the charity auction as Robert Hayes, the billionaire defense contractor. But tonight he had one more crucial preparation to make. He drove to a storage facility across town using a key card to access a climate-controlled unit. Inside lay the remnants of his old life. Awards from the Department of Defense, photographs with senators and generals, newspaper clippings from the rare instances Neuralink had received public recognition before receding into the shadows. More importantly, there were the contracts, signed agreements worth hundreds of millions of dollars for ongoing projects, purchase orders from NATO allies, patent filings poised to reshape multiple industries. Rob selected a few key documents and placed them in a briefcase. At the charity auction, when Henry Caldwell called him Sir CEO, these would serve as his irrefutable proof. Not that he needed to prove anything to Linda or Trevor. By then, their world would already be crumbling around them. He locked the storage unit and drove home to his modest apartment above the garage. Tomorrow, the game would begin in earnest, and Robert Hayes had never lost a game that truly mattered. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. Pinnacle Industries headquarters, a shimmering glass tower, perfectly projected the image Trevor Sullivan desperately craved. Success, power, prosperity. In truth, it was a facade for a company bleeding cash to maintain its opulent exterior. Rob, now flawlessly transformed into Michael Torres, strode through the marble lobby with the unshakable confidence of a man holding every winning card. The metamorphosis was perfect. Subtle facial prosthetics, expertly applied by a contact from his intelligence days, had subtly altered his bone structure just enough to render him unrecognizable. Contact lenses shifted his brown eyes to an unsettling blue, his hair was dyed black and styled differently, and even his posture and gait had been painstakingly modified through weeks of rigorous practice. "Mr. Torres, welcome to Pinnacle Industries." Trevor's secretary, a nervous woman in her 50s, greeted him. "Mr. Sullivan is ready to see you." Rob followed her to the top floor, his gaze sweeping over the exorbitant artwork and furniture adorning the offices. Every detail screamed of a company straining to project an image of success. It was precisely what he'd anticipated. Trevor's office was a monument to unbridled ego. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk the size of a small car, and walls plastered with photographs of Trevor shaking hands with local politicians and business leaders. The man himself was exactly as Rob remembered from the restaurant. Mid-40s, artificially tanned, with a kind of aggressively firm handshake that overcompensated for deeper insecurities. "Michael, great to finally meet in person," Trevor boomed, pumping Rob's hand with excessive enthusiasm. "I have to say, the preliminary numbers your people sent over have me very excited." Rob smiled, settling into the plush leather chair opposite Trevor's desk. "My clients are always excited when they discover a company with Pinnacle's evident potential. The manufacturing sector is ripe for the kind of vertical integration we specialize in." For the next hour, Rob played his part to perfection. Michael Torres was sophisticated, exceptionally knowledgeable, and most crucially, immensely wealthy. He spoke of international markets, supply chain optimization, and manufacturing efficiency with the kind of authoritative expertise that could only stem from years of helming a profoundly successful technology company. Trevor was practically salivating by the time the presentation concluded. "So, let me make sure I understand," Trevor said, leaning forward eagerly. "Your consortium is prepared to invest $50 million for a 30% stake in Pinnacle Industries." "That is correct," Rob confirmed. "But there are conditions. My clients require full transparency, complete access to your books, manufacturing capabilities, and strategic plans. They also demand assurance that current management will remain in place and that their investment will be used exclusively for company expansion." Trevor's face lit up with almost desperate relief. "Of course. Absolutely. I've built this company from the ground up and I have no intention of going anywhere." Rob knew Trevor was lying. The man had inherited Pinnacle from his father and had been systematically driving it into the ground for 5 years. But he also knew Trevor would agree to anything to get his hands on $50 million. "Excellent," Rob said, standing and extending his hand. "I'll have my legal team draft the preliminary agreements. We should be ready to move forward within the next few weeks." "That's fantastic!" Trevor practically shouted. "You know what this calls for? A celebration. My fiancé and I are attending the Children's Hospital charity auction next weekend. You should join us as our guest. It'll be a great opportunity to meet some of the other major players in the city. Rob's smile was genuine for the first time all day. I'd be delighted. As he departed Pinnacle Industries, Rob activated a secure communication device and dispatched a brief message. Target acquired. Phase 3 is go. The response arrived within minutes. All assets in position. The charity auction will be memorable. Phase 3 was the most delicate part of Rob's elaborate plan. Over the coming week, Michael Torres would gradually reveal inconsistencies in his background. Nothing overtly dramatic, just subtle discrepancies designed to make a careful investigator suspicious. Trevor, intoxicated by the promise of $50 million, wouldn't be careful, but Linda would be. Rob had spent 12 years with Linda Morrison Hayes. He knew her better than she knew herself. She was inherently suspicious, bordering on paranoid about deception, and utterly obsessive about thoroughly researching anyone who entered her life. She would investigate Michael Torres, and she would find precisely what Rob intended her to find. The brilliance of the plan lay in its exquisite simplicity. Linda would discover that Michael Torres was a fraud, but she wouldn't be able to conclusively prove it quickly enough to prevent Trevor from making an absolute spectacle of himself at the charity auction. By the time she unraveled the full truth, it would be far too late. But Rob had one more staggering surprise awaiting them. He drove to a private airfield outside the city where a sleek Gulfstream G650 sat waiting on the tarmac. The pilot, a former Air Force officer named Captain Riley Walsh, snapped to attention as Rob approached. "Good to see you again, sir," Captain Walsh said. "Are we ready for the extraction?" "Not yet, Captain," Rob replied, a glint in his eyes. "But soon, very soon." Inside the jet's luxurious cabin, Rob opened a secure laptop and began typing. A message materialized on screens in 3 different time zones, reaching individuals who owed their careers, their fortunes, or even their very lives to Robert Hayes. The game enters its final phase next weekend. Stand by for signal. Within hours, the responses began flooding in. Ready and waiting, General Morrison. All financial instruments in place, Goldman. Media assets standing by, Chun. Legal team assembled, Rodriguez. Rob closed the laptop and gazed out at the shimmering city skyline. Somewhere out there, Linda was likely trying on dresses for the charity auction, probably spending money she didn't possess to impress people who fundamentally didn't matter. Trevor was undoubtedly fantasizing about the $50 million that would never materialize. Neither of them knew that they were about to attend the most pivotal evening of their lives, the night when Robert Hayes would cease being a mere grease monkey and become precisely who he'd always been, a billionaire with the unyielding power to utterly destroy his enemies and the boundless patience to execute it perfectly. The charity auction was 6 days away. Rob had waited 6 months for his revenge. He could easily wait 6 more days. Chapter 4. The Shadow Network, Doctor. Amanda Foster had been Linda's closest confidant since nursing school, and she harbored serious misgivings about Michael Torres. Sitting in her pristine home office 3 days before the charity auction, Linda scrolled through the background check she'd commissioned from a private investigator. "Look at this, Amanda," Linda fretted, pointing to her laptop screen. "Everything about this Torres guy checks out, but something just feels off. His business registration in Delaware is only 6 months old. His previous company supposedly dissolved due to regulatory issues, but there's no official record of what those issues actually were." Amanda, a sharp woman who had meticulously built a successful medical practice through scrupulous attention to Detail frowned at the information. Why are you so worried? Trevor seems absolutely thrilled about the investment. That's precisely why I'm worried, Linda retorted. Trevor sees dollar signs and completely stops thinking clearly. Remember that disaster with the Chinese manufacturing contract? He nearly bankrupted Pinnacle because he didn't do his due diligence. What Linda didn't know was that Rob had meticulously anticipated her investigation. Every single piece of concerning information she'd unearthed had been painstakingly planted. The recent Delaware registration, the conveniently mysterious dissolved company, the carefully crafted gaps in Torres's employment history, all of it was designed to cultivate her suspicion without providing her with enough concrete, undeniable evidence to prove outright fraud. Meanwhile, across the sprawling city, Rob was initiating the most pivotal phase of his intricate plan. The abandoned warehouse in the industrial district appeared indistinguishable from every other failed business in the area, yet inside it pulsed with a low, controlled hum of activity. Banks of computers lined the walls, each meticulously monitored by specialists in cybersecurity, financial investigation, and information warfare. This was Rob's war room, staffed by former military intelligence officers who had previously worked for him on highly classified projects. "Status report," Rob commanded as he entered the main operations center. Colonel Sarah Martinez, his former liaison with the Pentagon, looked up from a bank of monitors displaying a cascade of financial data. "Operation Pinnacle is proceeding precisely on schedule. We've identified every debt, every obligation, and every single vulnerability in Sullivan's business empire." "What about the personal side?" "Even better," Martinez replied with a grim, knowing smile. "Sullivan's been brazenly using company credit cards for personal expenses for 3 years. His mortgage is underwater and he's carrying over $200,000 in personal debt. The engagement ring he bought for your ex-wife, charged directly to Pinnacle's marketing budget." Rob absorbed this information without a flicker of emotion. "What's our timeline for the charity auction revelation?" Dr. James Chun, Rob's former chief technology officer at Neuralink, joined the conversation. "Henry Caldwell will arrive at 8:30 p.m. as scheduled. The precise moment he publicly calls you Sir CEO, our media assets will unleash the first devastating wave of information about your true identity. By 9 p.m., every major news outlet will have confirmed that Robert Hayes, the mysterious founder of Neuralink Dynamics, is alive, well, and worth approximately $3.2 billion, and Torres will vanish as if he were a figment of imagination," Martinez declared, his voice a chilling whisper. "Every last shred of documentation, every fleeting mention, every digital echo, all will be meticulously expunged. The world, it seemed, would soon believe Michael Torres was an elaborate fabrication, a phantom conjured from thin air." Rob offered a grim nod. "And Sullivan's reckoning?" Chin, with a flick of his wrist, conjured a psychological profile onto a nearby monitor. "Our analysis indicates he'll traverse the classic stages: the initial shock of denial, the fiery surge of anger, the desperate dance of bargaining, and finally the crushing weight of depression. Yet his profound narcissistic personality disorder guarantees he'll ultimately deflect all blame, pointing fingers at everyone but himself. Linda, mark my words, will bear the brunt of his fury within 48 hours. The plan was a symphony of malevolence, exquisite in its cruelty. Trevor, exposed as a charlatan on the precipice of a partnership with a ghost, would be utterly consumed by humiliation. His credibility would crumble to dust. Pinnacle stock would plummet into oblivion, triggering a debt collection that would strip him of every last possession. More devastatingly, it would rip back the veil for Linda, revealing the true monster she had abandoned Rob for. But Rob, ever the master strategist, had reserved the most crushing blow for the grand finale. Martinez displayed the surveillance footage from last night. The monitor flickered to life, revealing a crystal-clear tableau. Trevor sauntering into an opulent hotel, arm in arm with a woman who was undeniably not Linda. The timestamp blared, 11:30 p.m. Meanwhile, social media posts confirmed Linda's innocuous presence at her book club until the stroke of midnight. "Name, Rebecca Thorne," Martinez replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Sullivan's former secretary. He's been entangled with her for 8 months, an entanglement that spans the entirety of his relationship with Linda." A cold, unyielding satisfaction seeped into Rob's very bones. Trevor Sullivan wasn't merely a fraud or a hapless businessman, he was a philanderer of the lowest caliber. Linda, who had abandoned a loyal husband, had chosen a man already steeped in deceit. "Release this," Rob commanded, his voice sharp and precise. 48 hours after the charity auction. Allow Linda the bitter taste of financial ruin first. Only then reveal the true essence of the man she chose. His secure phone hummed, vibrating with an encrypted message from Henry Caldwell. "Confirmed for tomorrow night. The guest list reads like a veritable who's who of American power. Your entrance will be nothing short of legendary." A faint smile touched Rob's lips. The charity auction's guest list boasted senators, federal judges, Fortune 500 CEOs, and foreign ambassadors. When Henry Caldwell unveiled Rob's true identity before such an august assembly, the revelation would detonate across every media platform simultaneously, a cataclysmic eruption of truth. Yet one crucial element remained to be orchestrated. "Chin, the Neuralink demonstration?" "Primed for deployment," Chin responded. "The autonomous vehicle system is fully loaded, awaiting activation in the garage. When the ravenous media clamors for proof of our technological prowess, we shall unveil a live demonstration that will render Tesla's creations mere child's play." For 6 painstaking months, Rob had not simply plotted revenge, he had meticulously positioned himself to emerge from the ashes stronger, more formidable than ever. The charity auction would serve as his dramatic reintroduction to the world. Bolstered by technology so cutting-edge it would instantly cement his status as a titan across multiple industries. An intriguing development concerning Linda's financial predicament, Martinez interjected. "Our investigation reveals she's been spending money she doesn't possess, gambling on Trevor to absorb her debts. Maxed out credit cards, a personal loan for the engagement party, even a lease on a luxury vehicle." When Trevor's house of cards inevitably crumbled, Linda would find herself personally shackled by approximately $180,000 in debt. The irony was a perfectly sharpened blade. Linda had deserted Rob, believing he could not provide the extravagant lifestyle she craved. Now she had amassed colossal debt chasing that very lifestyle with a man on the precipice of losing everything. Rob checked his watch. 24 hours until the charity auction. 24 hours until Linda Morrison Hayes was forced to confront the true, bitter cost of her betrayal. "Final preparations, everyone," he announced to the hushed room. "Tomorrow night we remind the world that Robert Hayes neither forgives nor forgets." The gathering storm. The morning of the charity auction dawned crisp and clear, the sort of October day that filled the city's elite with a self-congratulatory, optimism regarding their tax-deductible largesse. In her borrowed penthouse bedroom, Linda gazed at her reflection in a full-length mirror, adjusting the delicate straps of a $5,000 Valentino gown Trevor had purchased for the occasion. She looked magnificent, and she knew it. The deep emerald green perfectly complemented her newly blonde hair, and the custom alterations made the dress fit her form as if it had been woven specifically for her. This was the life she had once only dared to dream of: designer attire, luxurious accommodations, and a man unafraid to lavish money on her happiness. Yet a subtle disquiet gnawed at her regarding Michael Torres. "Trevor, darling," she called out to the bathroom where he was grappling with his bow tie. "Are you absolutely certain about this Torres investment? I've been doing some research, and there are gaps in his background that concern me." Trevor emerged, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Linda, we've discussed this ad nauseum. The man is offering me $50 million. His references are impeccable, his legal team legitimate, his wire transfer confirmations genuine. What more could you possibly desire?" "I merely wish to ensure we aren't being ensnared in a trap," Linda replied, her nursing background imbuing her with a natural suspicion of anything that seemed too perfect. "Have you personally spoken to any of his former business partners?" "His previous company dissolved due to regulatory issues," Trevor stated, his voice acquiring the sharp edge it always did when he felt challenged. "That's hardly uncommon in international consulting, Linda. I appreciate your concern, but I assure you I know precisely what I'm doing." What Trevor, in his hubris, failed to grasp was that his carefully constructed confidence was about to be obliterated in the most public, spectacular fashion imaginable. Across town, Rob meticulously made his final preparations in a luxury hotel suite that dwarfed anything Trevor could ever hope to afford. The room was registered under one of his legitimate identities, a shell company that discreetly owned real estate across 3 states. Unlike Trevor's temporary penthouse, Rob owned this suite outright. He stood before his own mirror, fastening the platinum cufflinks, a gift from a grateful general after Neuralink's technology had spared an entire battalion in Afghanistan. His custom-tailored tuxedo had cost more than most people's cars, but more critically, it projected the exact image he desired: understated opulence and an almost palpable quiet power. His secure phone displayed a flurry of messages from his team: "Media assets in position. Story ready for release on your signal," Chin confirmed. "All surveillance equipment tested and operational. We'll have full coverage." Martinez chimed in: "Financial instruments locked and loaded. Sullivan's credit will be obliterated by midnight. Goldman is already alerted." Rob's transformation back to his true identity was absolute. The prosthetics were gone, his hair restored to its natural color, and he moved with the assured grace of a man who had not only built but commanded billion-dollar enterprises. Michael Torres had served his purpose. He would soon cease to exist. But one final piece of theater remained. At precisely 2 p.m., Rob dialed Trevor Sullivan's direct line. "Trevor, it's Michael Torres," Rob began, his voice laced with a subtle hint of concern. "I'm afraid there's been a slight complication with the wire transfer. My legal team is advising we postpone the signing until Monday to resolve some international banking regulations." Rob could practically hear Trevor's pulse spike through the phone. "What kind of complication?" Trevor demanded, his voice strained. "We've been planning this for weeks." "Nothing serious," Rob assured him smoothly. "Just some paperwork that needs to be refiled in the Cayman Islands. These things, happen with international transactions." We'll still attend the charity auction tonight as planned, and I'll have everything sorted out by Monday morning. The lie was impeccably crafted. Trevor was now snared, caught between his desperate need for the investment and his public commitment to attend the auction with Linda. He couldn't back out of the event without losing face, but he also couldn't secure the capital that would save his company. "All right," Trevor finally conceded, his voice tight. "Monday morning. But Michael, I truly need this deal to close swiftly. I'm experiencing some significant cash flow issues that require immediate resolution." "Of course," Rob replied, his tone effortlessly smooth. "I completely understand. See you tonight." Rob ended the call, a slow smile spreading across his face. Trevor Sullivan was precisely where Rob desired him. Desperate, anxious, and utterly unprepared for the storm that was about to break. The final hours before the charity auction melted away. Rob's team conducted last-minute equipment checks, confirmed media contacts, and verified Henry Caldwell's position. Everything was meticulously arranged. At 6 p.m., Rob settled into the plush rear of an armored Mercedes S-Class, unassuming on the exterior, yet equipped with military-grade communication systems and bulletproof glass. His driver, another former military specialist, had previously provided security for heads of state. "Evening, sir," the driver greeted him. "GPS indicates clear roads to the Hilton. We should arrive precisely on schedule." Rob leaned back into the sumptuous leather, reviewing the evening's timeline one last time. At 7:30, he would enter the charity auction as a respected businessman supporting a worthy cause. Trevor and Linda would spot him as Michael Torres, likely avoiding him due to their anxiety over the delayed investment. At 8:30, Henry Caldwell would arrive, publicly acknowledging Rob as Sir CEO, triggering the revelation of his true identity. The media would instantaneously begin reporting the explosive story of Robert Hayes's reemergence from the shadows. By 9 p.m., Trevor's world would be in freefall, Linda would be reeling in shock, and Rob would be fielding interview requests from every major news outlet in the nation. The Mercedes pulled up to the Hilton's grand entrance at precisely 7:25 p.m. Rob observed Trevor's Lamborghini already parked in the VIP section, signifying Linda and Trevor were already inside, likely networking with potential business contacts and eager social climbers. Rob adjusted his tie one last time and stepped out of the Mercedes. He was no longer the unassuming mechanic who had lost his wife to a flashy CEO. He was Robert Hayes, billionaire defense contractor, and he was about to remind everyone, especially Linda, precisely who he truly was. The game was hurtling toward its dramatic crescendo, and Rob had never felt more alive. The mask falls. The grand ballroom of the Hilton stood as a magnificent testament to Chicago's elite, its crystal chandeliers casting a warm, inviting glow over tables, each sponsored for a staggering $10,000. The charity auction for Children's Hospital had drawn 400 of the city's most powerful individuals, creating the perfect stage for the unfolding drama. Linda felt a gnawing sense of unease, despite her exquisite gown. The other women glided through the crowd with an effortless confidence born of inherited wealth, while Linda constantly reminded herself to hold her wine glass just so, and to refrain from laughing too loudly at the vapid cocktail party chatter. Trevor, however, was in his element. He worked the room with the practiced ease of a seasoned politician, shaking hands, slapping backs, and liberally name-dropping his way through conversations about yacht clubs and private school enrollments. To any casual observer, he appeared to be a resoundingly successful businessman celebrating his latest triumph. "Darling," he murmured, sliding up to Linda, his third scotch of the evening clutched in his hand. "I just spoke with Senator Morrison about the trade delegation to Southeast Asia. He believes Pinnacle would be an ideal fit for the manufacturing component." Linda offered a practiced smile and nod, but her attention was drawn to the entrance. She had spotted Michael Torres entering alone, looking remarkably different from the man she had researched. Gone was the subtle nervousness she had detected during their brief meeting at Trevor's office. This version of Torres moved with the self-assured grace of a man who owned the very air he breathed. "Trevor," she said quietly, "doesn't Torres look different to you?" Trevor glanced toward the entrance, shrugging. "He looks fine to me. Rich guys all blend together in tuxedos." Before Linda could respond, a commotion near the auction stage drew their attention. A woman in a vibrant red evening gown was engaged in a heated argument with security regarding seating arrangements, her voice, despite her obvious attempts at discretion, carrying across the ballroom. "I don't care what the chart says," the woman exclaimed. "My husband specifically requested table 12, and that's precisely where we are sitting." Linda recognized her. Rebecca Thorne, Trevor's former secretary, who had departed Pinnacle 6 months prior for better opportunities. What struck Linda as peculiar was Rebecca's presence at a charity auction with a $1,000 ticket price, especially given her previous salary of $35,000 a year. More troubling was Rebecca's repeated furtive glances in Trevor's direction, while Trevor seemed to be deliberately avoiding eye contact with her. "Trevor," Linda began carefully, "isn't that Rebecca Thorne, your old secretary?" Trevor's face went ashen and he quickly turned away from Rebecca. "Yes, I think so. Small world. She must be here with someone." But Linda's nursing training had instilled in her an acute ability to discern physical manifestations of stress. Every sign pointed to Trevor being profoundly uncomfortable with Rebecca's presence. His hands trembled almost imperceptibly. A fine sheen of sweat coated his brow despite the air conditioning, and his eyes kept darting towards the exit, as if contemplating an immediate escape. Before Linda could pursue the subject, a ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd as someone of immense importance entered the ballroom. Linda turned to see an elderly man in an impeccable tuxedo making his way through the throng, people practically bowing in deference as he passed. "Who is that?" Linda whispered. "Henry Caldwell," Trevor replied, his voice filled with an almost reverent awe. "Old money, real old money. His family has been wealthy since before the Civil War. He's worth perhaps $8 billion, but he maintains an incredibly low profile." Linda watched as Caldwell moved through the crowd with an unspoken authority that spoke of never having to prove anything to anyone. What truly captivated her was his apparent scanning of the room, as if searching for someone specific. His gaze finally settled on Michael Torres. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auction host announced, his voice amplified, "if you could please take your seats, we shall commence this evening's program." As the crowd began to gravitate toward their assigned tables, Linda noticed that Caldwell was walking directly toward Torres. The two men's eyes met across the ballroom and something passed between them. A flicker of recognition that suggested a far deeper acquaintance than mere business associates. Linda gripped Trevor's arm. "Did you know Torres and Caldwell were acquainted?" Trevor looked utterly bewildered. "What? No, that's impossible. Torres is an international consultant. Caldwell deals in domestic investments and old family money. They wouldn't move in the same circles. But even as he spoke, Henry Caldwell approached Torres with a warm smile, extending his hand. The conversation was too distant to discern, yet their body language conveyed familiarity, respect, and something else Linda couldn't quite identify. Then Caldwell's voice rose, just loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Sir CEO, I didn't expect to see you here tonight." The word struck Linda like a physical blow. Sir CEO. That was not how one addressed an international consultant. That was how one addressed an individual occupying a position of profound corporate power. Trevor had gone completely white. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Torres isn't a CEO. He's a consultant representing a consortium of investors." But as Linda watched, Torres's entire demeanor shifted. Gone was the slightly deferential air of a man seeking a deal. In its place was the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. Torres, if that was even his real name, smiled at something Caldwell said, then began walking purposefully toward their table. "Trevor," Linda said urgently, "I think we need to leave, right now." But it was too late. The man they knew as Michael Torres stood beside their table, his blue eyes, eyes that Linda now realized held an unnerving familiarity, fixed on Trevor with an expression of cold amusement. "Trevor," he said, his voice carrying just enough volume for the surrounding tables to hear, "we need to discuss your company's rather creative approach to financial reporting." Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. What? Michael, what are you talking about?" The man smiled, and Linda felt her blood turn to ice, because that smile, despite the different hair color and eye color and facial structure, was precisely like one she had seen 1,000 times before. "Actually," the man said, his voice now carrying clearly across the increasingly quiet ballroom, "my name isn't Michael Torres. My name is Robert Hayes." Linda's wine glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the polished marble floor. Around them, conversations died as people turned to stare at the unfolding drama. "That's impossible," Trevor exclaimed, his voice cracking. "Robert Hayes is a grease monkey. He fixes cars. He's nobody, Robert." Because Linda now knew with terrifying certainty that this was her ex-husband. He laughed, and the sound sent chills down her spine. "Is that what you truly believe?" he asked, his gaze shifting from Trevor to Linda. "That I'm nobody?" Henry Caldwell appeared beside Robert, his elderly face wearing an expression of barely contained amusement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the now silent ballroom, "allow me to properly introduce Robert Hayes, founder and CEO of Neuralink Dynamics, one of the most successful defense contractors in American history." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam bursting, whispers erupted as everyone in the ballroom struggled to process the seismic revelation. Linda felt the room spin around her. The grease monkey she had abandoned for a better life stood before her in a custom tuxedo, being introduced as a billionaire defense contractor by one of the wealthiest men in America. Trevor looked as if he were about to vomit, and Robert Hayes, her ex-husband, the man she had betrayed and abandoned, smiled at them both with the cold, predatory satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. "Now then," Robert said conversationally, "shall we discuss that $50 million investment you've been so eagerly anticipating?" The truth unveiled. The charity auction had been irrevocably transformed from a genteel fundraising event into the most riveting drama Chicago high society had witnessed in decades. Phones were discreetly emerging from purses and jacket pockets as the city's elite began documenting what was unmistakably shaping up to be the scandal of the year. Linda sat frozen in her chair, her mind grappling with the impossible task of reconciling the man before her with the husband she had left 6 months prior. This was not simply Robert with a different haircut and expensive clothes. This was a fundamentally different person. The quiet mechanic who had toiled late nights in his garage had been supplanted by someone who commanded the attention of billionaires and moved with the undeniable confidence of absolute power. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the excited murmurs now filling the ballroom. Robert's smile was neither kind nor cruel. It was simply empty of warmth. "Of course you don't, Linda. Understanding would have required you to actually pay attention to the man you married instead of the superficial lifestyle you believed you deserved." Trevor had found his voice, though it emerged as little more than a croak. "This is impossible. I researched you. Robert Hayes owns a garage. He fixes cars. He's—" Trevor's voice trailed off as the full, devastating implications began to sink in. "Nobody," Robert finished, his gaze piercing. "Yes, that's precisely what you told everyone, wasn't it? Poor Linda, married to a grease monkey who couldn't provide for her properly." He gestured around the opulent ballroom. "Tell me, Trevor, how does it feel to discover you've spent 6 months mocking a man who could buy and sell your entire company with pocket change?" Henry Caldwell stepped forward, clearly relishing the unfolding spectacle. "Perhaps I should provide some context," he announced to the increasingly captivated audience. 5 years ago, Robert Hayes sold Neuralink Dynamics to the Department of Defense for $3.2 billion. The transaction was classified, which is why it never made the financial news. But I can assure you every defense contractor in America knows the name Robert Hayes. A woman at a nearby table gasped audibly. "Neuralink Dynamics? They developed the autonomous drone system that revolutionized military reconnaissance, didn't they?" "Among other things," Robert confirmed, his gaze never leaving Linda and Trevor. "I've spent the last 5 years developing next-generation technology while maintaining the perfect cover of a small business owner. It's astonishing how invisible you can become when people genuinely believe you're beneath their notice." Linda felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Every memory of the past year was recontextualizing itself in her mind. The garage wasn't a failing business, it was a clandestine laboratory. The late nights weren't Robert struggling to make ends meet. He was developing technology worth billions. The modest lifestyle wasn't because he couldn't afford better, it was because he was operating under deep cover. "You knew," she said, her voice growing stronger as a searing anger began to replace her initial shock. "You knew I thought we were struggling financially. And you let me believe it?" Linda's voice, barely a whisper, was laced with a venomous disbelief. Robert's gaze remained chillingly undisturbed. "I merely allowed you to unveil your true self, Linda," he countered, his words cutting through the tense air like a sharpened blade. "A dozen times I laid bare the essence of my true work, trusting you with a profound intimacy. But you, my dear, were too preoccupied with the dreary symphony of our mediocre existence to truly listen. You forged your destiny based on a shallow assessment of my worth. Now you shall reap the bitter harvest of your choices." Trevor, a figure of frantic energy, clawed at his phone, a desperate attempt to grasp at some semblance of reality. The Torres investment, the $50 million, it wasn't real, he stammered, his voice cracking with dawning horror. A phantom, Trevor, Robert confirmed, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Michael Torres, a mere construct, conjured to unveil your eager plunge into partnerships without a shred of due diligence. Tell me, did you bother to verify a single one of Torres's supposed references? Did you probe the shadowy past of his alleged company? Or were you so blinded by the siren song of quick money that you willfully ignored every blaring red flag? The color drained from Trevor's face, leaving behind a stark, ghastly pallor as the full, crushing weight of his monumental humiliation settled upon him. Around them, the grand ballroom, once a tableau of genteel sophistication, now thrummed with a frenetic energy. Chicago's elite, their eyes wide with avid fascination, bore witness to a live, devastating masterclass in vengeance. But why? Linda demanded, her voice escalating to a piercing crescendo. Why this elaborate charade? Why not simply tell me who you truly were? Robert's laughter was a cold, sharp sound that sent shivers down the spine. Because the woman I truly loved, Linda, would never have abandoned her husband for mere money. She would have battled alongside me through our struggles. She would have trusted me. She would have honored the sacred vows she made. His voice then descended into a deadly whisper, each word a lethal dart. You abandoned Robert Hayes, the humble garage owner. You never deserved to even meet Robert Hayes, the billionaire. A new voice, smooth and confident, sliced through the strained silence. Actually, there's more to this story. All eyes swiveled to Dr. James Chun, who approached their table, a tablet clutched in his hand, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on his lips, the unmistakable expression of one about to unleash utter devastation. Dr. Chun, Robert greeted, a chilling politeness coating his words. I trust you possess additional insights for our dear friends? Chun activated the tablet, turning its screen towards Trevor and Linda. Trevor Sullivan, you've been under meticulous investigation by the SEC for brazenly pilfering company funds for your personal indulgences. But that, my friends, is hardly the most captivating revelation. The tablet then blazed to life with a crystal-clear video. Trevor entering a hotel room accompanied by Rebecca Thorne, the timestamp starkly revealing a date merely 3 weeks past. Linda's gasp was a sharp, audible rupture in the stunned silence of the ballroom. You've been cheating on me. Trevor's face, already ashen, now flamed a vivid, horrifying crimson. Linda, I can explain. With your secretary. Linda's voice rose to a furious shriek. The woman you swore simply left for better opportunities? How long, Trevor? How long have you been defiling our relationship? 8 months, Chun interjected helpfully, his voice devoid of emotion, encompassing the entire span of your relationship with Linda. Oh, and Rebecca Thorne. She's been receiving $5,000 monthly payments from Pinnacle Industries. Officially, consulting fees. Unofficially, they appear to be hush money. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of excited whispers as Chicago's elite bore witness to a meticulously executed social annihilation. Linda, her designer gown shimmering under the opulent chandeliers, rose from the table. With a sharp, resounding crack that echoed to the very back of the room, she slapped Trevor across the face. You bastard! She screamed, her voice raw with unbridled fury. I destroyed my marriage for you. For a lying, cheating fraud. Robert observed the unfolding drama with a detached, almost scientific curiosity, like a researcher meticulously noting the outcome of a finely tuned experiment. Fascinating, he mused conversationally. You rage at Trevor for his infidelity, yet you seem to have conveniently forgotten your own betrayal of me with him. Linda spun towards Robert, her face a grotesque mask of rage and humiliation. That's different. Our marriage was already over. Was it? Robert's voice was a dangerous whisper. Because I distinctly recall you being my wife when you first sought solace in Trevor's bed. I recall the fabrications about late work shifts while you were entwined with him. But please, Linda, illuminate for everyone how your adultery was somehow more virtuous than his. The silence that descended was absolute, suffocating. Linda stood frozen, her mouth agape as the grim realization dawned. Every word she uttered merely dug her deeper into the abyss of public humiliation. Robert stood, straightening his cufflinks with an infuriably casual elegance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the captivated ballroom, "I believe this concludes the evening's entertainment. Trevor, you'll be receiving a visit from the SEC on Monday morning. Linda, you'll be receiving the rather substantial bills for all those credit cards you've so enthusiastically maxed out, foolishly assuming Trevor would shoulder your debts." He paused at their table one final lingering moment, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearby tables. "You both got exactly what you deserved," he stated with the chilling finality of a judge delivering a life sentence. "Each." With Henry Caldwell by his side, Robert Hayes walked away, leaving behind two utterly shattered souls, their lives irrevocably pulverized before the very eyes of 400 witnesses. Behind him, Linda's heartbroken sobs echoed through the crystal-lit ballroom as the crushing weight of her choices finally descended upon her. The reckoning began the morning after the charity auction. Chicago buzzed with the feverish hum of gossip, recounting the most spectacular public humiliation in the city's recent memory. Social media exploded, a digital wildfire of videos and photos from the event, transforming Robert Hayes from an unknown garage owner into a mysterious, enigmatic billionaire overnight. Financial news channels scrambled, piecing together the fragmented story of Neuralink Dynamics and its elusive founder. Linda awoke alone in Trevor's penthouse, her head throbbing, a testament to both the wine and the emotional wreckage of the previous evening. Trevor had stormed out after the auction, a storm of curses and pronouncements about damage control and legal consultations. He hadn't returned, and a chilling realization began to coalesce in Linda's mind. He likely never would. She padded to the kitchen in her silk pajamas, another extravagant purchase she could ill afford, and made coffee, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The morning news already blared the story, footage from the charity auction playing on a relentless loop. Billionaire defense contractor Robert Hayes emerged from 5 years of anonymity last night at a Chicago charity auction, revealing his divorce and apparent financial struggles were an elaborate cover for classified military contracts worth billions. Linda muted the television, sinking into the leather sofa that Trevor would likely lose within the month. Her phone had been a ceaseless symphony of buzzing since dawn, a relentless barrage of calls from reporters, former friends, and creditors who, having seen the news, realized her looming inability to pay her debts. The most agonizing part wasn't the searing humiliation nor even the impending financial ruin. It was the growing, agonizing awareness of what she had truly forfeited. For 12 years, she had been married to one of America's most successful entrepreneurs, and she had wantonly discarded it all, believing he lacked ambition. Her phone vibrated again, her sister's number flashing across the screen. "Maggie," Linda answered, her voice etched with exhaustion. "Linda, what in God's name is going on?" Maggie's voice crackled with urgency. "I just saw the news about Rob. Is it true? Is he really a billionaire?" Linda closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. Yes, it's true. And you left him for that Trevor guy? The one who's been cheating on you? Yes. The silence on the other end of the line stretched, thick and pregnant with unspoken judgment, for nearly a minute. Finally, Maggie spoke again, her voice meticulously controlled. Linda, you are the biggest idiot who ever lived. After hanging up on her sister, Linda desperately tried to reach Rob. His old number was disconnected. She tried the garage, but a recording informed her the business was temporarily closed. Every conceivable avenue back to her former life had been hermetically sealed. Meanwhile, across the city, Trevor Sullivan was discovering with breathtaking speed just how swiftly a reputation could be obliterated. By 9 a.m., his accountant had delivered the devastating news. 3 major clients were already severing ties with Pinnacle Industries. By 10 a.m., the SEC had issued a chilling statement. A full-blown investigation into financial irregularities at the company was underway. By 11 a.m., Pinnacle's stock price had plummeted by a staggering 60%. Trevor sat in his lawyer's office, his expensive suit wrinkled from a restless, anguished night, struggling to comprehend how his meticulously constructed life had crumbled in less than 12 hours. The SEC investigation is the least of your problems, his attorney David Kim explained, his bedside manner as comforting as a funeral director's. The real issue is the loans. Kim's words were delivered with brutal precision. Pinnacle Industries has been operating on a precipice of credit for 18 months, and your creditors are going to demand immediate repayment. This scandal makes you a colossal flight risk. How much time do I have? Trevor asked, his voice a strained whisper. If you're lucky, Kim stated without an ounce of pity, 2 weeks before bankruptcy. If you're not lucky, they'll freeze your assets tomorrow. Trevor's phone buzzed with yet another call from a creditor. He had stopped answering them an hour ago. What about Linda? If I can prove the relationship was legitimate. Kim shook his head, a gesture of stark finality. Trevor, you were caught on video, a veritable cinematic production, cheating on her with your secretary, even if Linda were inclined to assist you, which, by all accounts, she clearly isn't. She possesses no assets to offer. According to the credit reports I pulled this morning, she's burdened with $180,000 in personal debt, accumulated under the misguided assumption that you would cover her profligate spending. The irony was a bitter, devastating draft. Trevor had relentlessly pursued Linda, believing she possessed a hidden fortune. Linda, in turn, had abandoned Rob, convinced that Trevor was a man of immense wealth. Neither possessed what the other so desperately sought, and in their myopic pursuit of an illusion, they had annihilated their previous lives. At that very moment, Robert Hayes sat in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, surrounded by a phalanx of generals and defense contractors, all eagerly awaiting the unveiling of his 5 years of shrouded innovation. The autonomous vehicle technology is merely the genesis, Rob explained to the assembled group, his voice resonating with quiet authority. The true breakthrough lies in the neural interface system, allowing for seamless human-machine integration. The military applications are self-evident, but the civilian market potential is limitless. General Patricia Morrison, the architect of Rob's original cover story, smiled with a knowing satisfaction. So the garage was in truth an advanced research facility? Among other things, Rob confirmed. I developed 3 separate patents that will irrevocably revolutionize transportation, communication, and energy storage. The market value is conservatively estimated at $50 billion over the next decade. The general's aide leaned forward, his voice deferential. Sir, there are multiple interview requests from prominent financial news networks. How do you wish to navigate media exposure? Rob considered the question. His emergence from the shadows was complete, but the management of his public image required meticulous precision. Schedule interviews with Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg. I intend to meticulously control the narrative surrounding Neuralink's technology and its future trajectory. What about your personal situation? The aide inquired diplomatically. The divorce and the circumstances surrounding it. Rob's expression hardened, a steely glint in his eyes. My personal life remains precisely that, personal. Any who choose to wallow in tabloid sensationalism rather than focus on revolutionary technology are welcome to interview someone else. But privately, Rob knew the personal narrative was far from concluded. Linda and Trevor faced financial ruin, social damnation, and the complete collapse of everything they had so eagerly pursued. The revenge was thorough, but Rob had one final lingering piece of business to conclude that evening. As the Chicago financial district settled into the deep embrace of night, Rob drove his true vehicle, a sleek $300,000 McLaren, meticulously hidden in a private garage across town, to the storage facility where he had kept the remnants of his former life. Inside the climate-controlled unit, he found it. The divorce papers Linda had served him 6 months prior, the document that had officially severed their 12-year marriage and entitled her to half of his visible assets. Rob smiled, a grim, humorless twist of his lips, as he perused the financial disclosure forms Linda's lawyer had filed. According to these documents, Robert Hayes was worth approximately $150,000 in total assets. Linda had walked away from a marriage to a billionaire, receiving a settlement worth less than the sparkling cost of her engagement ring. The irony was a perfect, exquisite torment. Linda had received precisely what she had so vehemently demanded, half of everything she believed Robert Hayes was worth. Rob locked the storage unit and drove home to his apartment above the garage. Tomorrow he would begin the arduous process of fully emerging into his new public life as a billionaire entrepreneur. But tonight he allowed himself a single, solitary moment of profound satisfaction. Linda Morrison Hayes had made her choice based on money, on status, on the relentless climb of social ambition. She had received a brutal, unforgettable lesson in the stark difference between appearance and reality, a lesson that would echo through the entirety of her remaining life. And Robert Hayes had proven something far more profound, that loyalty, trust, and unwavering character could never be bought at any price. The revenge was complete, yet in its execution, Rob had discovered an unexpected truth. The burning anger that had consumed him for 6 months had vanished, replaced by something infinitely more valuable, the absolute, unshakable certainty that he had made the right choice in letting Linda go. She had never been worthy of the man he truly was. 6 weeks after the charity auction, the full devastating scope of Robert Hayes's revenge had unfurled across Chicago, a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction. The city's financial district buzzed with hushed tales of the most comprehensive takedown in recent memory, while social media meticulously chronicled every excruciating detail of Linda and Trevor's spectacular fall from grace. Trevor Sullivan's world had collapsed with mathematical precision. Pinnacle Industries had filed for bankruptcy protection within 2 weeks of the auction, its stock price eventually plummeting to zero. The SEC investigation had unearthed 3 years of financial irregularities, culminating in criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. Trevor himself faced a grim reality: 5 to 10 years in federal prison, assuming he could even afford a competent defense attorney. The penthouse had been seized by ravenous creditors, along with the Lamborghini, the watches, and every other superficial bauble that had defined Trevor's shallow existence. He was currently confined to a desolate studio apartment in Queens, working as a night manager at a 24-hour parking garage, a position he had obtained only because the owner, mercifully, had not bothered to Google his name. Linda's situation was, if possible, even more dire. The $180,000 in debt she had so blithely accumulated had triggered a relentless cascade of financial disasters. Her nursing license was under review, a direct consequence of the stress-induced mistakes she had begun making at work. The opulent luxury apartment she had rented after the charity auction had been repossessed, forcing her ignominious retreat to her parents' suburban split level. But the social humiliation, a cruel, relentless torment, was the most agonizing punishment of all. Chicago's elite society had transformed Linda and Trevor into cautionary tales, their names synonymous with insatiable greed, treacherous betrayal, and spectacular misjudgment. Former friends, once effusive, now crossed the street to avoid even the briefest of conversations. Linda could not even venture into a grocery store without recognizing someone who had witnessed the auction footage online. The irony was a bitter, galling pill. Linda now understood with searing clarity precisely what she had lost. The news coverage of Robert's emergence had unveiled not just his immense wealth, but his genuine brilliance, his profound accomplishments. She had been married to a man who had revolutionized military technology, birthed breakthrough innovations in artificial intelligence, and cultivated relationships with the most powerful figures on the global stage. And she had abandoned him because she had mistakenly believed he wasn't successful enough. On a cold December morning, Linda sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the disheartening debris of her former life. Designer clothes, now mocking relics, hung haphazardly in a closet beside faded teenage concert t-shirts, creating a surreal timeline of disastrous decisions. Her phone buzzed with yet another call from a debt collector, which she summarily ignored. A soft knock on her door interrupted her misery. "Linda," her mother's voice called softly, "there's someone here to see you." Linda's heart leaped, a desperate, irrational flicker of hope. For weeks she had clung to a pathetic fantasy: Rob appearing at her door, ready to forgive her, to take her back. The fantasy was pathetic, she knew, but it was the only fragile thread that made the days bearable. She practically flew downstairs, not bothering to fix her disheveled hair or change out of her pajamas. But the man standing in her parents' living room was not Robert Hayes. "Mrs. Hayes," the visitor said, consulting a clipboard with detached professionalism. "I'm David Rodriguez from Hayes Legal Services. I have some documents that require your signature." Linda's mother hovered anxiously in the doorway as Linda accepted the thick manila envelope. Inside were divorce finalization papers, property transfer documents, and a letter penned in Rob's precise, unyielding handwriting. "Linda," the letter began, devoid of any warmth, "these documents complete the legal separation of our lives. As you will see, I am transferring ownership of our former house to you, along with enough money to pay off your current debts. This is not kindness. This is closure." Linda's hands trembled as she continued to read. "You made your choice based on money, so let me be unequivocally clear about the financial reality. The house is worth $300,000. Your debt forgiveness totals $180,000. In exchange for signing these papers, you will receive approximately $120,000 in net worth, almost exactly what you thought I was worth when you abandoned me. The next paragraph was devastating in its clinical precision. I want you to understand something, Linda. This money represents the absolute limits of my charity toward you. You will never see me again. You will never contact me again. You will never benefit from my success again. You made a choice to value money over loyalty, status over character, and appearance over substance. These are the direct, unalterable consequences of that choice. Linda sank into her mother's floral armchair, tears streaming down her face as she reached the final crushing paragraph. Trevor Sullivan is facing federal charges and will likely spend the next decade in prison. Rebecca Thorne has testified against him in exchange for immunity. You picked a cheating, lying fraud over a man who loved you enough to build a life with you. I hope it was worth it. The letter was signed simply R. Hayes, with no personal sentiment, no acknowledgement of their shared history. David Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, if you are willing to sign these documents, the debt forgiveness will take effect immediately, and the house deed will transfer to your name, Mr. Hayes wanted me to emphasize that this is a final settlement with no possibility of future modifications. Linda looked at the papers through her tears. It was a generous offer, more than generous. Rob was offering her financial stability, a fresh start, despite everything she had done to him. But it was also a final rejection, a legal wall erected between them permanently. What if? Linda began, then stopped herself. There was no what if. Rob had been brutally clear about the finality of this arrangement. She signed the papers. After Rodriguez departed, Linda's mother sat beside her on the floral sofa. Honey, what happened between you and Rob? I never understood why you left him. Linda laughed bitterly, a hollow, mirthless sound. I thought he wasn't ambitious enough, Mom. I thought he was wasting his potential fixing cars when he could have been doing something important. She gestured at the divorce papers, a cruel indictment. Turns out he was doing something important. I was just too shallow to see it. But this is good news, isn't it? Her mother asked, clutching at straws. You'll have the house and your debts will be paid off. You can start over. Linda nodded, but she felt hollow inside. Rob had given her exactly what she had claimed to want, financial security. But in doing so, he had also made it devastatingly clear that she had never been worthy of what he had truly been offering. A partnership with one of the most brilliant men she had ever known. Meanwhile, across the city, Robert Hayes was putting the final exquisite touches on his new life. The garage had been transformed into a legitimate research facility, replete with state-of-the-art laboratories and manufacturing capabilities. Neuralink Dynamics had been reborn as a public company, with Rob at its helm as CEO, its market valuation soaring to an astonishing $20 billion. He had moved out of the modest apartment above the garage and into a penthouse that made Trevor's former residence look utterly insignificant by comparison. But more importantly, he had surrounded himself with people who truly valued competence, loyalty, and unwavering character. Qualities that Linda had never truly appreciated. The revenge against Linda and Trevor was complete, yet in the process Rob had discovered something unexpected. The burning anger that had fueled him for months had been replaced by something far more valuable. Absolute clarity about what kind of people deserved his trust and his loyalty. Linda Morrison Hayes had revealed her true stark character when tested by adversity. She had chosen money over love, status over substance, and immediate gratification over a profound long-term partnership. The woman he had thought he loved had, in bitter truth, never actually existed. As Rob stood in his new office, gazing out over the glittering Chicago skyline, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for Linda's betrayal. She had inadvertently liberated him from a marriage built on her fundamental misunderstanding of who he was and what he truly valued. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Henry Caldwell. "Dinner tonight? I have someone I'd like you to meet. Brilliant, accomplished, and completely unimpressed by money." Rob smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and typed back, "Looking forward to it." The Robert Hayes who had once lost sleep over his wife's betrayal was gone. In his place stood a man who understood that the most potent revenge was not destruction. It was a success so absolute, so profound, that his enemies simply became irrelevant. Linda Morrison Hayes had gotten exactly what she had demanded, a fresh start and financial security, but she had also received something she hadn't anticipated. The absolute crushing certainty that she had thrown away the best thing that had ever happened to her, and Robert Hayes had gained something even more invaluable, the knowledge that he would never again make the mistake of loving someone unworthy of him. The story was over, the lesson was learned, and Robert Hayes was finally completely free. Ladies and gentlemen, since you've listened to the end of this story, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which state you're watching from. Let's see what percentage of elite viewers make it to the end. And please kindly turn your attention to the screen after this message. There you'll find a full playlist of thrilling stories, a subscribe button for the channel, and our most captivating story. Click, enjoy, and thank you.